Hi, my name is Chris. I am the lead astronomer on the Caribbean Sky teaching program. I currently teach at a famous old boarding school in London, England. I teach astronomy and physics to our students during the daytime and coach the sports in the afternoon. We are very lucky to have a research-grade astronomical observatory on the roof of our physics department, which I use for teaching and research. The original design for the Caribbean Observatory, which will be used for this program, was based on the design of this London observatory. Here is a view from the rooftop looking into London. Before I joined the school that I currently teach at, I was a research scientist at the University of Cambridge in the UK, as part of a team from the European Space Agency trying to build models of the very early universe. I used to help to run the observing evenings at the West Cambridge Observatories, and I was very lucky to work in the same department as the late Professor Stephen Hawking, who's always been a great inspiration for me. I was the lead designer on the Caribbean Observatory, which we'll be using for this program, which has some of the largest telescopes in Central America. The Caribbean has some of the most beautiful scenery in the world. I love to explore the islands and meet some of the incredible people. The islands have so much to give, and now we'd like to give something back by way of this astronomy education program. Each episode will be designed as a self-contained program full of information on objects to look out for in the night sky that you can see above you this evening. Designed in the Caribbean for the Caribbean. We hope this can be useful for Caribbean schools to share amongst their students as a way of putting them in touch with the night sky above them. Being so close to the equator gives incredible views of the night sky like nowhere else on the planet. We will share images and videos of the night sky objects, all taken from your local observatory. Let's start on a beach near Castries. Look into the western sky as the sun is setting. Above the sun, you'll see a beautiful bright object visible until around 10 p.m. at night. This is the planet Venus, the second closest planet to the sun. Let's zoom in and take a closer look at the planet to see what it looks like. The computer software I'm using for this can be downloaded for free and is given as a link below the video if you'd like to try it yourself. Venus is the brightest object in the night sky apart from the moon. It does change in brightness over the course of a year, and sometimes it gets closer to the sun in our sky, so it's more difficult to see. But currently it's quite far away from the sun in the night sky, so we get a beautiful clear view. As we get closer to Venus, you can see its beautiful crescent shape, very similar to a crescent moon. Here is a live image of Venus that we took from the telescopes a few weeks ago. You can see this beautiful crescent shape through the telescopes. This cool image shows Venus through the gap in the roof in our observatory, and then on the computer screen in the foreground you can see the photograph that we took of it through the telescope. This was the first image that we took of Venus in its beautiful crescent shape a few weeks ago. The planet is a little smaller than Earth and is very similar to Earth inside. We can't see the surface of Venus from Earth because it is covered with thick clouds. However, space missions to Venus have shown us that its surface is covered with craters, volcanoes, mountains and big lava plains. The surface of Venus is not where you'd like to be, with temperatures that can melt lead and an atmosphere so thick it would crush you, and clouds of sulfuric acid that would smell like rotten eggs. Something else to look out for in the evening sky just after the sunset is the constellation of Orion. This is one of the more popular constellations, and if you look down from the 3 stars that form his belt, you'll see a small pink cloudy region. This region is called Orion's Nebula. A nebula is a large cloud of gas and dust, a bit similar to the clouds that we get on planet Earth. Here we've taken a flight across our galaxy to get a close-up look of this beautiful nebula. The light takes over 1,000 years to travel from this nebula to planet Earth. This huge cocoon of gas and dust is home to perhaps 1,000 stars, most of which were formed at the same time and are all held together by gravity. It's so bright that you can see it with the naked eye. You don't need any binoculars or a telescope. The nebula has this beautiful reddy purpley colour due to being formed of hydrogen gas. All of this gas gets energised by the new stars around it, giving it its ambient colour. Let's now take an incredible trip to the edge of our galaxy, the Milky Way. A galaxy is the name for a collection of stars. We think our galaxy has around 200 to 400 billion stars, many of which are just like our Sun, and many of which also have an entire solar system of their own. The dusty regions you can see here are all part of the spiral arms of the galaxy. The very centre of our galaxy is the brightest region, and we think this is where a huge black hole is located, swallowing all the stars that get too close. Our galaxy is also surrounded by billions of other galaxies. Some are similar to our Milky Way, but some are very different indeed. We'll take a closer look at more distant galaxies in the next episode. We've arrived back at the Orion Nebula. It's one of the most studied features in the night sky, and more photographs have been taken of this nebula than almost any other object in the sky. Let's look at a photograph we took from the Caribbean Observatory last year. We left the exposure open on our camera for over 24 hours, and this is the image that we produced. You can see a huge amount of detail that you couldn't otherwise see with your naked eye or a telescope, and that's one of the advantages of using a long exposure camera. Let's now fast forward time in the Caribbean night sky. The stars are just like the Sun. They rise in the east and they set in the west. The best time for stargazing is anywhere between 11 PM and 2 o'clock in the morning. Some objects are better later on at night time, so they're higher in the sky. One of these is the Great Square of Hercules. If you look at the top two stars in the bright square and look in between, approximately in the middle, you'll see a small group of stars. You can see this with your naked eye, but if you've got a pair of binoculars, you can zoom in and see individual stars in this small cluster of stars. This is known as M13, or the Hercules cluster. It contains several 100,000 stars and was discovered in the 1700s. The cluster is part of our Milky Way galaxy, but it's found outside the main plane or the main disk of the galaxy, and it's called a globular cluster. Quite a strange name. There are many of these globular clusters all around our Milky Way, and many of them are of similar size to the Hercules cluster. In 1974, the Arecibo radio telescope beamed a signal towards M13 containing information about the human race, DNA and atomic numbers. Have a go at spotting the Hercules star cluster in your night sky tonight. Let's move on to one of the most obvious features in the night sky, our beautiful baby brother, the Moon. Over the next month, the Moon will pass through all 12 constellations of the zodiac as it orbits around the Earth. It will change its appearance and at one point will become a beautiful full moon. We took this image last year to try and record as much detail as we could on the surface of the full moon. This image is about 30 photographs combined and processed. Let's take a flight down onto the surface of the Moon to look at some features that you can see even with the naked eye. One of the most obvious features is the giant crater that you can see on one side of the Moon. It's got giant rays that are spreading from the central crater. This is called the Tycho crater. All the rays that you can see emanating from the central crater are caused by the impact of a giant asteroid that smashed into the Moon about 100 million years ago. Another bright feature on the near side of the Moon is a giant mountain range called the Apennine mountain range. This range is on the northern part of the Moon's surface. They are named after the Apennine Mountains in Italy, and we think they were formed about 4 billion years ago. The total length of the range is about 600 kilometers, that's about 400 miles, and the highest peaks stretch to about 5 kilometers or 3 miles high off of the surface of the Moon. Two of the mountains are perhaps most famous because they form the valley where the Apollo 15 lunar mission made its landing. The Apollo 15 landing is considered one of the most scientifically successful missions of the Apollo program. As the Moon orbits around the Earth, the half of the Moon that faces the Sun will always be lit up. The different shapes of the lit portion of the Moon that can be seen from Earth are known as the phases of the Moon. Each phase repeats itself every 29.5 days. New moon, crescent, half moon, gibbous and full. Gibbous, half moon, crescent and new moon. During a new moon is the best time to look up at the night sky. You will see more stars and features in the galaxy than at any other time of the month. Something else of interest over the next month or two is the 3 planets that are visible early in the morning just before sunrise. If you're out of bed early enough in the morning, go outside and look into the eastern sky. You will see 3 bright objects, which are the 3 planets Mars, Jupiter and Saturn. The highest of the 3 is the planet Jupiter, the largest in our solar system, a huge gas giant, with beautiful rings in its atmosphere and a giant red spot. The central planet of the 3 is my favourite, Saturn. The rings of Saturn look beautiful through a pair of binoculars. The lowest of the 3 planets that rises latest is the dusty red planet Mars. Slightly smaller than Earth and with a much thinner atmosphere, we now know that water exists on Mars in the form of ice at the north and south poles. When you go outside to look up at the stars, give your eyes a few minutes to become adjusted to the night sky. If you go outside and lay down in your garden and look up at the sky, within 20 minutes you'll be able to see thousands and thousands of stars. You may also see some shooting streaks of light across the sky. These are called shooting stars. They're not really stars, they are grains of dust coming from outer space that are burning up as they enter our atmosphere. The larger the shooting star, the larger the grain of dust, and so the brighter the flash will be, and these can be seen every night. Stars are big burning balls of hydrogen. Some stars are cool, they're red in colour, and some stars are hot, they are blue in colour, a bit like a flame. The blue stars will burn through all of their energy much faster than the red stars, so they won't live as long. It's been an incredible 50 years for astronomy, with the creation of space-based telescopes and some of the largest telescopes in the world created to observe these beautiful distant objects. Powerful computers have now allowed us to produce incredible 3-dimensional simulations of what these distant objects may look like if we were to fly through them. The vast majority of photographs and images taken by telescopes are all free to access and download from the internet. If you look in the links in the video description below, you'll find links to various online sources that you can use to download some of these videos, photographs and simulations. One type of object that astronomers are particularly interested in at the moment are these clusters of stars called globular clusters. How were they created and where did they come from? Each one of these in our galaxy contains hundreds of thousands of stars, and they're one of the easiest objects to spot with a pair of binoculars or a telescope. And they're one of the most interesting things for scientists to study. The stars are so densely packed together in the centre that if you were living on a planet in a globular cluster, your night sky would be full of stars. There are around 150 of these objects in and around our Milky Way galaxy. The largest cluster in our galaxy is called the Omega cluster, only visible from more southern locations like the Caribbean. Light from this cluster has taken 16,000 years to get to us, and the galaxy, we think, contains up to 10 million stars. Some astronomers think that this cluster was actually a swallowed galaxy core billions of years ago that collided with our Milky Way galaxy. This cluster is so bright that you can even observe it with the naked eye looking up into the right part of the sky. On a dark evening, look to the south, high in the sky, and you'll see a bright cluster of stars, which is the Omega cluster, in the Centaurus constellation, near the Southern Cross. Because these clusters contain the largest and the oldest stars in the universe, astronomers think they should be the prime hangouts for black holes, which are formed when massive stars die and collapse under their own gravity. A recent discovery has shown the first ever detection of black holes inside these clusters of stars. This finding helps us understand how these clusters of stars form and how these incredible black holes evolve in these types of systems. They detected a star orbiting something that was completely invisible. We look forward to seeing you soon for more adventures into the beautiful night sky above the Caribbean. See you soon. That brings our Caribbean sky introduction video to an end. We look forward to bringing you videos, images and resources from the Caribbean Observatory in the coming months. And make sure you keep your eyes on the beautiful sky.